So, Mike, who are some of your best clients, for ongoing business? Where do they come from? Where's your business come from?
Well, they're business people, but the backbone of my commercial collection practice revolves around the property and casualty insurance business. We represent several insurance carriers. We used to represent several more, but they get merged, they get bought out, that type of stuff. But we collect their earned premium, we collect their audits and their third-party deductibles. Now, most people go into an insurance policy and they think, well, all right, it's reasonable to assume that I'm going to have $250,000 in gross sales. You had a good year. All of a sudden, your gross sales are $500,000. Okay, so you paid an initial premium on the $250,000 in risk, but over the course of a year, which you can't tell in advance, you have double that risk. So the premium has to go up.
Payment is inevitable in your world, right?
Well, it has to be. Otherwise, the lights don't stay on. Then there's residential real estate, which I view as the happy part of my practice. The closings are typically love fests. You don't have adversarial proceedings at closings. The residential real estate is my escape from the constant cutthroat. And then there's traffic tickets. That's comic relief. Because you don't know what you're going to see when you walk into traffic court, and
Yeah.
it's usually let's make a deal. People are incredibly willing to trade money.
Payment is inevitable in your world, right?
Well, it has to be. Otherwise, the lights don't stay on.
Oh, so Mike, I know you do a variety of different things. And why don't you share? I know you've got like three buckets
I've
and
got three buckets,
yeah,
yes. And there's a reason for each of the three buckets. Okay, commercial collection and judgment enforcement, which we'll talk about. That's the bread and butter. That's the main focus of my practice. Then there's residential real estate, which I view as the happy part of my practice. You get to put a young couple into a new house, have the established couple, upgrading, and selling as well. The closings are typically love fests. You don't have adversarial proceedings at closings. That's the collection aspect of it, and the residential real estate is my escape from the constant cutthroat. And then there's traffic tickets. That's comic relief because you don't know what you're going to see when you walk into traffic court, and
yeah.
it's usually let's make a deal. People are incredibly willing to trade money for points on your driver's license because the points will stick with you for roughly 40 months. And if you have over a certain amount of points, you're going to get surcharged on your insurance, your auto insurance. So it's well worth it for some people just to exchange money for points. So it's let's make a deal. It's what can we do? How can we make everybody happy?
Well, it's the exchange of smaller money now for larger money later, right?
Smaller money now for larger money later and continuing for 40 months
Sure.
because those points will stay with you for a long time.
Yeah.
So think of it. In New York, the auto policy runs for 6 months at a clip. Okay, so you're gonna have six insurance premiums over 3 years that are in. It could be significantly or incredibly higher depending upon how you are. I mean, if you're male under 25, single, you're gonna make small mortgage payments.
Absolutely. So traffic is comic relief, real
Hmm.
estate is your happy place,
Yeah.
and collection enforcement is adversarial and pretty cutthroat. So let me ask you a question because no doubt you work mostly with other professionals, right?
Yes.
Helping resolve their clients' issues.
I would say it's 50-50 between other
Okay.
professionals, yeah, other professionals and pro se. I'll deal with a debtor, whether it be an individual debtor, which is not that often. Usually it's the principal of a company. I'll deal with the principal at arm's length before they bring in an attorney. I will work with them, and I make a point of telling the debtors, look, if you work with me, I'm going to work with you. If you don't owe the money, show me why you don't owe the money. I have no trepidation about taking documentation to my client and saying, hey, this debtor is right. We need to go away. Because if he doesn't owe it, I don't want it. I don't want to have that reputation of taking money from people who don't owe.
You don't
Uh,
have that reputation.
Well,
You
I don't
don't.
want it to even start. I mean, if you owe it, resistance is futile and payment is inevitable. That's what's going to happen.
Absolutely. So, all of that business stuff aside for a moment,
Hmm.
you and I connect on another topic that, we're headed into warmer weather. in New
Oh,
York.
we're connected on two topics. We went to the same high school at different times together.
Absolutely. We have a world of people together, which happens at ARG quite a bit. I mean, you and I, and then a whole bunch of other people we found out a couple of years ago, we all went to the same high school at different moments, different times. And
Right.
graduating classes were about 1,000 people. So the idea that we would have known each other in high school is kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of kids there at the same time. But in the professional world, we all ended up in the same place. So that was a fun fact and fun to get to know. And then your brother and my sister know one another, and right.
Yep.
So all fun.
Hmm.
But it's the weather's getting warmer, and because we grew up in the same place, we grew up with some of the same interests,
Very
right?
much so. Very
So
much so.
what do you do on Long Island when the weather gets warmer? And if
You
you're
can do
my
you could do you could do one of two things. You can fish or you can play golf. You can't
Or
do
you
both.
or you can be a boater,
Right,
right? Which
right, right.
not all boaters or sailors are fisher people. But I was going to say my brother and my father were known to fish 12 months a year. Ice, sleet, rain, snow, it didn't matter. But yes, fishing. So the weather's going to get warmer.
And in a little over 2 weeks, striper season opens on Long Island.
100%.
April
So,
15th.
so excited. Can't wait.
Yes.
Can't wait. So Mike, when some let's just go back to business for a minute because
Hmm.
again, we have many professionals in common, so I know how often some of those folks refer to you. And who are some of your best clients, for ongoing business? Where do they come from? Where's your business come from?
Well, they're business people, but the backbone of my commercial collection practice revolves around the property and casualty insurance business. We represent several insurance carriers. We used to represent several more, but they get merged, they get bought out, that type of stuff. But we collect their earned premium, we collect their audits and their third-party deductibles. Audits is simple. The way to develop a premium on an insurance policy, you have to quantify the risk. How much is the insurance company, extending themselves to cover your risk? The best way, or one of the best ways, is how busy are you? How much money are you making? Gross sales. Now, most people go into an insurance policy and they think, well, all right, it's reasonable to assume that I'm going to have $250,000 in gross sales. You had a good year. All of a sudden, your gross sales are $500,000. Okay, so you paid an initial premium on the $250,000 in risk, but over the course of a year, which you can't tell in advance, you have double that risk. So the premium has to go up, and that goes up at the end on a post-policy term audit. And not most of the times, because if it was most of the times, the insurance companies would be out of business. A few,
Yeah,
in certain
they're quite
instances,
healthy. They're
yes.
healthy.
In certain instances, the insured will say, "Hey, I'm not going to pay that. That's not what we agreed to," and they haven't read their policy and they don't know. And I try to explain it to them. And when it gets down to almost fisticuffs, that's where I come in, and I will explain, because I find that education is far more superior to any other negotiating tactic. If you can explain to somebody who may not be as sophisticated as you are, if you could explain to that person why he or she owes this particular amount of money, the light bulb goes off, and you've got a pretty good chance of getting paid, or at least making a deal and letting the deal go for as long as these guys can handle.
Sure.
So that's premium. There's also third-party deductibles, which we collect, and a lot of times insurance companies ignore the third-party deductibles. A third-party deductible: I'm in your building. Okay, I slip on something and I fall down the stairs in your building. Okay, I sue you. You turn it over to your insurance carrier. Your insurance carrier, sees that I'm grievously injured, and they offer to pay me $100,000, and I accept. They come to you and they say, you have a $10,000 deductible on that insurance policy. Now you have to pay us back the $10,000. And you're going to say, wait a sec, I didn't authorize you settling with Borg. Borg's a liar. He was out in front of his house chopping wood the other day. We saw this. We have it on video. What people don't realize is that in most property and casualty policies, an insurance company has the authority to settle using its business judgment for whatever it deems reasonable and proper. Because you don't know what a jury is going to come back with if this case goes to jury. They can come back with telephone numbers and area codes, multiple digits. And if a carrier is saying, "Hey, look, we can get rid of this case for
Right.
$100,000 and save ourselves the legal fees and the potential risk," we're going to settle the case.
Cost of doing business, right?
Cost of doing business.
So
So
it's really interesting, right? We always told don't sign anything before you read it, and that includes the small print.
yeah, a lot of the cases that I handle can be resolved before they even get started by the insured reading their insurance policy. I hope too many insureds don't look at this and start reading their policies because then I might be out of business. But
You're
I
not going to be
explain,
out, you're not going to be
but
out of business, unfortunately.
but I explain to them why when I'm speaking with them. Here's your deductible endorsement. Here's your audit endorsement. This is your rate. We originally started with the premiums, but it's a contract. So I've grown it to where I can pretty much litigate any contract or collect on any contract. If you have a contract to buy widgets and, I failed to pay, for the widgets that you delivered, and,
Right.
that's a contract. That's a breach of contract. So,
You also do, you shared a really interesting story, and without getting into the whole story, you made us aware in our business environment about fraud and about how sophisticated some of the communications, right,
yeah,
in your world have become and what people should be paying attention to, right?
yeah. Yeah,
Which is,
there's a smell test. There's
yeah.
there's definitely a smell test. I had a situation, and I can go into it briefly, where I was retained over the phone, or I tried. Well, I guess I was retained over the phone by some gentleman, and he had this situation with a promissory note, and it sounded reasonable. I think my first red flag was when I asked him, um, "Who referred you to me? Who do I thank? Who am I buying dinner for?" Uh, and he just glossed by it and wouldn't tell me. Okay, so that was the first red flag. He retained me. He signed my retainer. I sent out my demand letter, and I had an email address. So in addition to mailing my demand letter, I emailed it. Like within 2 or 3 days, I got this settlement proposal with a $90,000 check. I'm like, this doesn't typically happen.
I was going to say, how often does that happen where you send a demand letter and they just send a check?
It does happen legitimately, but this just didn't feel right because the debtor was in Buffalo, New York. The check was drawn on an attorney's account in Baltimore, Maryland. And the FedEx envelope, I think it came from Toronto. So it was just weird. So what I did was I called the maker of the check. I called the law firm in Baltimore, and I started explaining to whoever, and at first they thought I was a scammer, and I had to explain to them, no, I'm not a scammer. I'm an attorney in New York, and they go, oh well, you're definitely a scammer, uh, you know, but I got this check, and did you write it? Is this your client? I'm seriously concerned about whether or not I should deposit this check. Took them about 2 days, and they got back to me, and they said, no, this is not our check. We did not write this check. I mean, I sent them a copy of it. Um, and my suspicions were confirmed because what would have happened had the red flags or the spidey senses or whatever it is, had those not gone off, I would have deposited the check. I would have waited probably 2, maybe 3 weeks, before remitting to my client net of my fee. And then after I would remit to my client, the check would bounce, and I'm out all that money out of my escrow account. Then I might be getting audited by the disciplinary committee because I would have had a serious escrow account problem. But I
These
saw
are,
it.
I was going to say, the part of this story is not just read the fine print, right, to know what you're obligated for in the event, right? Like the
Hmm.
insurance company, like you said, pays out 100 grand, you have a 10 grand deductible. But if it seems to be too good to be true, it usually is. It still
Yes.
holds true. And in that event, it really highlights how one, you can protect clients, right,
Hmm.
by being aware of what is happening. And two, how business owners and clients need to seriously watch, right, communications around payment.
Yeah. Yeah.
More so than ever. We have a member who was working with a client, and that client's executive admin, somebody who handled the client's billing, did an ACH for $23,000 and it turned out to be bogus because they didn't look at the domain to know exactly, they hit reply, they clicked on the link that was provided. The names were all correct. The client's name was correct. All the information was accurate, except that once they clicked on the link, the domain was different.
Right.
So they've become very sophisticated now with the advent of AI for everybody's use.
Mm-hmm.
It is more sophisticated than ever. And they are scraping data, whether we know it, like it or not, and they're just kind of waiting to use it. So
They're waiting to use it.
cautionary tale to all business owners. And in your world, you've seen it firsthand.
Yeah. You have to trust your instincts. Like it says in the movies, trust your instincts, Luke. You
Yeah.
have to trust your instincts, and everything that I knew, and everything that I felt was just pointing in the wrong direction with this check.
So whether you want to be Mike's adversary, you want to make him happy, or you want to make him laugh, there's an opportunity to work with you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks for sharing. This was great.
Thank you.